Hi, in this video, I guess I want to make a comparison. So it's sort of like, how many steps you take. It takes 2 steps to reach the deprivation, to realize the deprivation you're reaching is something that's based on not getting something you want. So it takes 2 steps. So it takes an extra step to realize it's something that you don't want, as opposed to the direct step it takes. So like one giant leap for mankind, or one small step for this, and one giant leap for mankind. It's one giant leap or one step to get to the point, or it takes one step to get to the comparison that you make when you're having an overt pain. So like I mentioned, it's a good way to make the comparison, analogize. It's sort of like hitting your foot in a step, using stepping on a nail. You reach the step of deprivation immediately, as opposed to the deprivation you want it. You want something, therefore the want, you need to reach the deprivation. So you want this, therefore the want creates the deprivation, as opposed to the pain directly reaching the pain. I reach pain, therefore I want to get rid of the deprivation of the pain. And you want, and I guess in a way it makes sense because you want both. You want to get rid of the pain, but also you want to gratify, get something. But I guess in a way, it's each step means less when it comes to making that. So it's one giant step because it's directly getting to the point, and it's 2 steps, um, 2 steps to reach the deprivation when it comes to because you want it, and it's has less value in a way. It has less value, weight, when it's just something you want, and you need to reach the want before you even reach the deprivation. Um, as opposed to the deprivation, you want to get rid of the deprivation immediately. You already have the deprivation. Now that you have the deprivation, you want to get rid of it. And when you're, say, hungry and it's something you want, you want it first before you want to get rid of it. And you don't really want to get rid of it unless you've satisfied it. You want to get rid of your hunger, of course, but it's not the same thing as wanting to get rid of a nail in your foot, because it's about getting rid of the negative sensation when it comes to, say, an overt pain or suffering, as opposed to something that has to do with not necessarily overt pain or suffering. So the overt pain or suffering is directly reached once you've immediately reached it, and you're already wanting to get rid of the suffering, as opposed to the want to eat a meal or satisfy your sexual gratification, or your sexual desire, because it takes the want first to want the thing that you're satisfying, as opposed to just wanting to get rid of the satisfaction immediately. And it's almost an illusion when it comes to the things you want to satisfy it, and you're only unsatisfied and deprived because you're not getting those things, as opposed to wanting to get something, say, you're not getting a sex, as opposed to someone being raped. And getting raped is more overt than you not getting sex, because it's something against someone's will more than anything. And while you're not getting sex, it's not something that's being forced upon you as overtly. And it comes down to imposition. It's not as forced upon you as much as, say, someone getting raped or being forced to have sex, as opposed to someone that's, just sitting there, you're not, being celibate or something. It's a different circumstance. You're not getting what you want. You want to have sex, but you're not getting it. It's not the same as you being raped. I'm not saying it can't cause problems. I'm just saying its action of itself doesn't mean as much as the forced imposition. It can have just as much of an effect. It can cause all sorts of suffering. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's not the same exact thing. It's more of an overt, forced imposition. I think that has more the relationship more than, say, how much pain in the end that it can cause. And we're not talking about the pain it can cause. We're talking about the pain it is in and of itself, without any kind of consideration for whatever implications it could have as an overall whole, or implications it can have towards something in the future based on all sorts of events that can happen. Um, Mostly based on insecurity in many cases. In that case, if we think about a person going on a killing spree or something because they didn't have sex or something, there's all sorts of things building up instead of just that, and it has to do with an underlying problem rather than just that. Because by default, not having sex is not the same thing as being raped, because being raped can have just as much of an effect. The fact that both of them can have the same effect, can, generally speaking, they both can lead that way. Shows that if they both can lead that way, that one's still more of an overt action. It's a forced imposition when it's, say, something like rape, than it is something the person not having getting what they want, sex. Because no one's forcing you to not have sex, and it's not a forced action, say, physically on your being. It's not something that's forced overtly as a physical manifestation of existence or reality based on forced non-consent. in a way, I guess, a way of looking at it. So you have to, when you're deprived, when you're not getting what you want, you have to get the want first to want to, and you don't even realize it, but you're satisfying it to get rid of your deprivation. Because the satisfaction, the desire you have is the deprivation that's feeding your desire to begin with. Any desire you have is a deprivation mechanism. And you realize just how you don't, it's hard to realize it's a fooling mechanism in a way as well, because it's something that you don't realize is an overt, it's not an overt deprivation, but it's a deprivation regardless. It's something, even though it seems almost like it's something that's building up, but it's building up because you want to satisfy it. It's a fooling mechanism, and that's what I mean when I say that. You build it up until you satisfy it. But there's two steps when you're trying to satisfy something, because you have to want it, and then you have to satisfy it, as opposed to directly feeling the pain. Feeling an overt pain, say, like I mentioned, being raped or being, wanting sex. You're going to have to want the sex first, and then you want to satisfy, as opposed to the rape. You're just trying to get rid of that pain. Or, you have a nail in your foot, you're trying to get rid of the pain. You're trying to get rid of something. You're trying to relieve something immediately at that point. And you're trying to relieve something at the same time, but it's relieving a built-up tension in you, which they're both tension. But what's the word I'm trying to use here? You're trying to relieve an overt tension as opposed to a tension that's not as, say, like the difference between an ache and a sting. The ache of trying to gratify your sexual desires as opposed to the sting of a nail, or the direct sting, the overt sting of something that's immediate and all-knowing. You know that something's stinging. An overt sting by a wasp or something, or a hornet or a yellow jacket, or a sting period, right? Or by a scorpion. As opposed to an ache you have because your stomach aches because you haven't eaten a meal. There, I guess those can be analogized because a sting is a little more overt and a little more than a biting your tongue or biting your finger than an aching tummy or a sore throat. The throat's sore, but you can still, when you swallow, you feel a sting. If that means anything. So yes, I think if anything, you can fill in the gaps if that doesn't make enough sense. At least the way I'm describing it from that initial point. It takes two steps if it's not getting what you want, and it's one step. It made sense to me, and I know it makes sense generally speaking if I'm not describing it the exact way I wanted to describe it. But it makes enough sense to me that I realize that it's something that makes sense at least as an idea. At least set a foundation for. It takes two steps if it's not getting what you want, it's in non-overt pain or suffering. Not getting what you want as opposed to one step. You reach there immediately as opposed to two steps. You need to have the it's an immediate deprivation as opposed to having to go through a deprivation to reach the obviously you have to go through a deprivation, but they're both pretty much the same. It's just not getting what you want as opposed to getting something you don't want. So it's jumping to the don't want anymore, I guess, is another way of looking at it. You jump to the don't want immediately in the one step, and you're not going to not want until you satisfy the desire you have, and satisfying the desire is a deprivation regardless when it comes to getting something that you want. So I guess that's another way of looking at it as well. So it takes two steps to, if it's something that you don't want, when it comes to metaphorically speaking or analogizing it, or it takes one step if it comes to some kind of overt pain or deprivation that you're experiencing, such as a nail or being burned alive. Any number of examples: being raped, not getting what sex you want. Any number of examples you can use as a good foundation for understanding exactly what I mean. But it's all easy, and I think, generally speaking, you understand what I'm saying, I hope. And if you don't, oh well, I guess you're too stupid to understand, right? And I know, I'm incoherent sometimes. Bite me. So, thank you. And bite me.